How's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, well, so in today's episode, I thought I'd briefly try to say something about a major change or development that took place during the 6th and 5th century BCE in ancient Greece, something that we often take for granted, actually. More specifically, what I'm referring to is the time of the Pre-Socratics, who, if you don't know, were a group of speculative philosophers slash proto-scientists who were around before Socrates was. You see, before the Pre-Socratics came on the scene, myth and mythological explanations were absolutely pervasive. But what happened is that the pre-Socratic thinkers, well, they started to somewhat reject these traditional mythological explanations in favor of rational and naturalistic ones. Now, that was a huge moment, to say the least. And again, it's what I want to try to say something about. Okay, so basically what the pre-Socratics did is they focused in on the problem of origins, or in Greek, the arche. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is that they were interested in trying to figure out what the root and the substance of the universe was. The question they asked and wanted to answer was, what was the basic material that made up the cosmos? Okay, but here's the thing. In coming up with an explanation for this origin and substance that they were after, they didn't couch it in terms of myth. No, they didn't posit some divine ancestor here or some mythical progenitor like previous generations had done. Actually, wait, I should be more accurate here. So it's not exactly true to say that they didn't posit some aspect of the divine in their explanations of things. No, despite their novelty and their boldness, there was still a kind of overlap of the mythical and the scientific at this point in time. I mean, just think about what the first pre-Socratic Thales said in the same sentence, actually. He said that all is water and that the world is full of gods. So here we get both a naturalistic explanation and at the same time a suggestion of divine omnipresence. So Thales, along with others after him, they move in a sort of borderland between two realms. But the point is that even though the mythical sticks around for a while, not to mention statements that sound like inspired oracles, the decisive step had been taken. The turn had been made, so to speak. What I mean is that, by and large, the Greek mind now tried to discover a natural explanation for the cosmos. And it did this both by way of reasoning and empirically, by way of observation. So now nature and the origins of things was to be explained by the material, by nature itself. Like, for example, they might say that water was the origin of all things, or fire. But the point is that it wasn't anything outside of that. And the explanation, well, that was much more impersonal and detached, rather than an expression of some personal God doing the work. So you might say that the power of the old gods began to slowly fade away. And the human mind, well, it grew stronger and more inquiring and more independent. The days of uncritical beliefs were waning. Now, this move from the domain of faith and intuition to the realm of the intellectual and the rational, this change was momentous. And at least one reason why it's so important is because now there can be a critical appraisal of each view or theory made. In other words, it can be tested. And because of this, it's possible to amend and to improve and to move forward. But notice that mythical accounts of the world or of the cosmos are not like that. A mythical account is, well, it's beyond discussion. It transcends the rational. It's absolute. It has divine warrant. So you accept it as it is. But the consequence of this then is that no mythical account of origins can ever become part of a progressive and growing increase of knowledge. Well, again, natural accounts of origins can. And that's because they're open to critical scrutiny and to intellectual judgment. And so they can be analyzed and modified and built upon, ensuring a continuous investigation into the nature of reality. Anyway, I mentioned earlier how many of the pre-Socratic thinkers who made claims about the origins and nature of the cosmos, that they moved in this strange borderland between a past mythological tradition and a new naturalistic one. Well, here's the thing. By the time we get to one of the last pre-Socratics, Democritus, who was contemporaneous with Socrates, I think it's safe to say that pretty much all mythological residue has been removed. You see, more than any other before him, his explanation of reality, Democritus's, was given in purely materialistic terms. For Democritus, the cosmos is just composed of two things, namely material atoms and what he called the void. So basically his hypothesis goes like this. What's going on, he thinks, is that these atoms, what they're doing is they're perpetually moving around in a boundless void. And when they randomly collide with each other, they stick together and they form the varying combinations that produce all of the objects of our phenomenal world, like tables and horses and humans and, well, entire planets too. And when these things die or perish, well, that's not the disappearance of matter. No, it's just the breaking apart of these particular combinations. The breaking apart of atoms, which will eventually go on to form entirely new bodies. So passing away is really just a kind of, well, it's just a kind of rearrangement of things. Anyway, so you see how all of reality is completely material for him. Okay, but there's more to be said here. You see, these atoms in the void, what they also do is they all move mechanically and indiscriminately, which is to say they're not animated or guided by something, by some kind of a cosmic intelligence. No, it's all a matter of blind chance for Democritus. Now, that's partly what makes Democritus such a momentous and such a radical thinker. For him, reality possesses absolutely no purpose. It's not marked by any divine order whatsoever. Now, it's worth laboring on this point some more because it's such a hugely important thing, especially given the time and the context. Like I mentioned, before the time of the Pre-Socratics, and especially before the time of Democritus, going right back to Homer, in fact, and through to Hesiod, and even the later tragedians, the vision of the world was one governed by a venerable mythology. One where, crucially, the gods created the universe as an ordered whole, where there was an ultimate harmony rather than a chaos, and where there was an overarching purpose and meaning, even if it wasn't always directly discernible right away. Well, with Democritus, there is none of this. No purposeful design, no supernatural interventions. All claims which, of course, have shaped future scientific thought, right? Now, I think it's hard to identify any of the Pre-Socratics as outright atheists, simply because of the context in which they lived. So none of them would be atheists in the literal sense of the term. But I do think it's pretty clear that Democritus, if he did believe in the gods, he certainly didn't think that they had anything to do with us. Unlike in Homer, where the Olympian gods watched closely and even intervened over the plain of Troy, within Democritus's naturalistic materialism, there is no higher order. There's no divine justice, and there's no personal divine patron guiding you. No, all there is atoms and the silence of empty space. You know, there's an interesting ancient anecdote that we have, and it comes from an ancient biographer who says that Plato disliked Democritus so much that he wanted to burn all of his writings. Now, whether that's true or not, it's certainly not implausible. It's not implausible because from Plato's point of view, what Democritus is saying is pretty harsh and subversive and even seemingly nihilistic. I mean, again, everything is unforgivably mechanistic in Democritus. Everything is determined by the random blows and separation of atoms in the void, and everything appears and disappears without any larger cosmic meaning or logic. Well, for Plato, this is simply not how the world is. No, as he says in one of his later dialogues, the world's been engineered by a divine craftsman, according to the principles of justice and beauty, he said. Well, again, there's no such thing in Democritus. Nope. Just the simple, unadorned mechanisms of the universe, where, as he says, anything else is just empty opinion. Bye for now.